Here's something happening in Berea, Ohio right now that nobody quite knows how to talk about yet, and I think that confusion itself is the story. There's a quarterback in that building who lasted until the 5th round on draft day, who watched a former #1 overall pick deal with shoulder problems, a torn ACL, and a ruptured Achilles before ever taking the reins of a season that was already circling the drain, and who somewhere between October and the first snowfall on the lake turned into the most talked about bench player anywhere in professional football, not just among rookies, not just among backups, among everyone wearing a helmet on Sundays. And as camp approaches, that conversation hasn't cooled off. It's gotten hotter because now there's tape to study, practice reports leaking out daily, and people who actually work inside that facility going on record with opinions about whether Shedeur Sanders might be 3 weeks away from stealing a job that the entire football world assumed was already spoken for. So let's get into it. Not the hot takes flying around social media. The actual documented shift happening right now in that building. The one a lot of people are either ignoring or just didn't see coming. First, the backdrop, because you can't understand the drama without it. Deshaun Watson walks into this season as a 9-year pro who has put his body through more surgical repair work than most players experience in 2 full careers combined. Shoulder issues that recurred more than once, a blown-out ACL, then an Achilles rupture that cut short whatever season he was trying to salvage before it even got rolling. This is a man who has spent more recent calendar time in a training room than on an actual football field running an offense. And still, when he showed up to a brand new staff's first off-season program under new head coach Todd Monken, he walked in wearing the invisible label of starter in waiting. Not because of anything he'd proven under this regime, because of history, because of the money tied to his name, because of the lazy logic of seniority. He's been the guy, so let him keep being the guy. That's the setup. On one side, the battle-tested veteran with the resume and the financial weight behind him. On the other, a second-year player still trying to outrun the shadow of a draft slide that, to anyone who actually watched him sling it around in college, never made a shred of sense. And here's where the real story starts. The part the loudest corners of sports media have been completely fumbling all spring. Jeremy Fowler over at ESPN, a guy with about as much real access inside that organization as any reporter covering this league, said something that deserved way bigger headlines than it got. He described this quarterback battle as legitimately fierce, the kind of competition that's going to drag straight through training camp and probably bleed into preseason games before anyone gets an answer. Then he dropped the line that actually matters. Watson entered the spring as the obvious frontrunner, and Shedeur has closed that distance. Not tried to close it, not hopes to eventually, closed it. Let that phrasing sit with you for a second, because gaps don't shrink on their own. One side has to be climbing while the other stalls, or slips. And what Fowler's describing, even with Watson reportedly moving well, looking explosive again, seemingly fully restored physically from that Achilles tear, is a margin getting smaller anyway. That's not one good scrimmage rep getting overblown. That's a real trend, significant enough that paid professionals with actual eyes inside that locker room are saying it publicly, on national TV. And he's not the only one saying it. Monken himself, the head coach whose own job security is wrapped up in getting this exact decision right, said the single most important sentence in this whole competition. He's seeing more decisiveness out of Shedeur. The ball is leaving his hand faster. Sure, it's easy to wave that off because nobody's wearing pads yet. Fair point, I'll give you that. But then Monken kept talking, and he said cutting out those negative plays. The sacks, the moments where the ball just sits in his hand a half second too long, that's going to be the separator. Not arm strength, not raw athletic upside. Decision speed, that's the entire competition according to the man who actually gets to decide it. Now stop and think about what that statement really means for a guy who, as a rookie, got shoved into a situation that would have buried most first-year passers without a trace. Behind an offensive line that was collapsing in real time on Sundays, throwing to a receiver group still trying to figure out timing with each other, let alone with him. Inside that mess, across 7 starts, Shedeur threw for 7 touchdowns. He also threw 9, some have it at 10, interceptions. I'm not going to dress that number up or pretend it was secretly brilliant, because it wasn't. Nobody who genuinely respects this kid's potential is going to spin that stat line into a hidden gem. But context isn't an excuse. It's the difference between judging fairly and judging lazily. A 5th-round rookie thrust into starting duty for a team that finished 5-12, protected by a line bleeding pressure on what felt like every other snap, with zero real chemistry built up with his guys, is not operating under the same conditions as somebody analyzing him from a press box with a latte in hand. When protection collapses as consistently as Cleveland's did, even 10-year veterans start making rushed, panicked decisions. Now drop a rookie into that exact same furnace. The picks tell part of the story. They don't tell all of it. And the people who actually watch every single snap from start to finish, who track the pre-snap reads, the protection calls, the route adjustments, not just whoever's scrolling box scores from their couch. Those are the same people telling reporters the gap is closing. This is really the central conflict of the entire story, isn't it? Two completely separate evaluations are happening at the exact same time. There's the outside read, built almost entirely on name value, draft pedigree, last season's stat sheet, and the comfortable assumption that the veteran obviously starts because that's just how it's supposed to work. And then there's the inside read, built on what's actually unfolding on that practice field every single day. No pads yet, but building steadily toward live contact. And right now, those two versions of reality are pointing in opposite directions. The public still mostly assumes Watson trots out week 1 without much resistance. The people inside the building are telling reporters this thing is wide open. I want to dig into why that disconnect exists, because I don't think it's some media conspiracy. And I don't think it's an accident either. I think it's something much more human than that. It's genuinely difficult for people to abandon a story they've already finished writing in their heads. Watson got the long-term deal. Watson has the resume. Watson, before his body started breaking down, flashed legitimately elite talent at points in his career. It's comfortable to assume that storyline just continues exactly as written years ago. It costs you nothing, no updated opinion, no admission that things changed, no discomfort. Meanwhile, accepting that a fifth-round rookie who threw double-digit interceptions in his debut season might genuinely be the better option right now requires updating your entire mental model in real time, based on practice reports you have no way of personally confirming. That's uncomfortable. Most people avoid discomfort instinctively, so they cling to the version of events requiring the least mental rewiring, even while the people standing closest to the situation are practically screaming that nothing here is as settled as the headlines suggest. But competitions like this always have a built-in deadline for the comfortable narrative. Eventually, the pads go on. Eventually, preseason games kick off. And reality has a brutal way of forcing everybody's hand, regardless of which story they'd prefer to keep believing. So let's break down what's actually fueling this shift. Because once you isolate it, it stops feeling mysterious at all. A second-year quarterback who already started as a rookie carries something most first-year players, even the genuinely gifted ones, simply haven't earned yet: real, live, painful, game speed experience. He's already stared down disguised NFL coverages. He's already felt a pass rush blow up a pocket because he held onto the ball a beat too long. He's already had to sit in a film room on Monday morning and watch a coaching staff dissect a decision he made under live fire on Sunday. That kind of lesson simply doesn't exist in a spring practice, no matter how polished or decorated the surrounding college resume was. So when Monken talks about improved decisiveness, about the ball coming out quicker, what he's really pointing to is the visible physical evidence of a guy who got burned in real NFL games and is now actively, measurably fixing it in real time. That's not projection. That's not some scout's optimistic note about long-term upside 3 years down the road. That's applied, in-progress correction you can point to on this month's practice tape right now. Now compare that to where Watson currently sits. And to be fair, by every account, Watson looks better physically than he has in a long stretch of seasons. The explosiveness in his legs appears genuinely back. He moves like an athlete again, not like a man rebuilding himself piece by piece. That's real good news for him and for this offense, regardless of who ultimately lands the job, because a healthy Watson at least gives this coaching staff actual options. But here's the part more people need to say out loud without flinching. Being physically healthy and being mentally rhythmically ready to run an NFL offense are two completely different things. Just because the legs returned doesn't mean the timing returned with them. It doesn't mean the rhythm with this specific receiving core came back automatically. It doesn't mean total command of a brand new offensive system under a brand new staff just snapped back into place the moment the medical clearance came through. Watson is essentially trying to learn an entirely new offense while simultaneously recovering from one of the most brutal multi-year injury stretches a quarterback can survive. That's two massive variables stacked directly on top of each other. Shedeur is only dealing with one of those. Sure, he's learning the new system too, but he's not also rebuilding his entire body from a catastrophic injury at the same time. Framed that way, the fact that he's closing the gap stops sounding like some shocking underdog twist and starts sounding exactly like what you'd expect from a talented young passer who simply isn't carrying double the developmental weight his competition is hauling around. There's one detail buried in Monken's comments that keeps pulling my attention back, and it's this idea of stacking plays, eliminating self-inflicted negative plays so the offense can string together positive ones consecutively, instead of constantly digging out of holes it created for itself. It sounds almost boring when you say it out loud, but that phrase is genuinely the foundation of modern, efficient NFL offense. You don't need a quarterback throwing for 400 yards and 3 scores every single week if he's also taking 3 sacks and tossing 2 interceptions in that same game. You need a guy who simply refuses to put his own offense in compromised positions, string enough clean, on-schedule plays together, and explosive plays start appearing naturally because the defense can no longer load up against any single tendency. In his own understated way, Monken is telling everyone exactly what he's grading these 2 passers on. Not flash, not arm talent, just who keeps this machine rolling forward without sabotaging it from the inside. And if that really is the grading scale, and I'm convinced it is because it's been Monken's offensive philosophy at every stop of his coaching career, then Shedeur's rookie year turnovers stop being some permanent red flag and start looking exactly like the correctable, teachable mistake this specific coaching staff was hired to fix. You don't bring in Todd Monken to polish a quarterback's deep ball. You bring him in to fix decision-making, tempo, and situational execution. That's his entire reputation league-wide, which means this entire competition is unfolding directly in front of the one coach in football most equipped to evaluate and improve precisely the flaw holding Shedeur back, and precisely the flaw that's prevented Watson from ever fully capitalizing on his talent through this rocky stretch. Now let's zoom out, because there's a franchise-wide chess match happening underneath all of this that isn't getting nearly enough attention. Cleveland doesn't currently hold the first overall pick in the upcoming draft, but thanks to the trade fallout connected to Myles Garrett's situation, the Browns are sitting on 2 first-round selections heading into the 2027 draft, and that incoming quarterback class is already being described as one of the deepest in recent memory. That single fact completely reshapes how you should be interpreting this quarterback competition happening right now. This isn't only about who jogs out for the season opener. This is about what 2026 reveals to the front office regarding whether they even need to invest serious draft capital into a quarterback again next year. If Shedeur wins this job and performs anywhere close to what his college tape and his second-half rookie flashes suggested he's genuinely capable of, that fundamentally alters Cleveland's entire roster-building blueprint heading into one of the richest quarterback drafts in recent memory. They could spend those premium picks building around their answer instead of going searching for one all over again. If Watson wins the job and produces, that buys the front office another full year of stability, while they continue evaluating whether Shedeur is a long-term franchise piece, a valuable trade chip, or a future competitor again down the road. Either direction shapes this organization for years, not months. That's exactly why this isn't being treated like some throwaway summer storyline by the people who cover this team closely. That's why insiders keep getting pulled back to it, over and over, all spring long. The stakes here stretch far beyond who lines up for the first offensive snap of the regular season. And honestly, I think that explains why Shedeur has carried himself the way he has through all of this. There's been a noticeable calm in how he's discussed this competition publicly, a refusal to get baited into the outside noise, the draft slide narrative, the contract chatter, any of it. He stayed locked into the meeting room, locked into correcting the specific issues this staff identified, locked into the process rather than the circus surrounding it. That's not a small thing. Plenty of young players in his exact spot, drafted lower than they felt they deserved, thrown into a brutal rookie season, would let frustration bleed into how they show up every day. Instead, by every account coming out of that building, he's been composed, professional, and entirely focused on the work in front of him rather than the noise around it. I think that matters more than people give it credit for, because evaluating an NFL quarterback isn't purely about arm talent or processing speed. It's about whether a coaching staff trusts a guy to absorb adversity without it breaking something in him. A rookie who throws double-digit picks and responds by getting defensive, blaming the system, or mentally checking out sends a completely different message than a rookie who throws those same picks and comes back the very next offseason, visibly tightening up his decision-making. One of those guys is showing you he's coachable. The other might already be showing you his ceiling. And from everything coming out of Berea this spring, Shedeur is sitting squarely in that first category, which, as much as any individual throw or read, is probably exactly why this competition has stayed alive far longer than the outside world ever expected. So where does all of this actually go from here? Training camp brings pads, and pads change absolutely everything. Pressure timing shifts, throwing windows shrink, hesitation gets punished instantly instead of forgiven. That's traditionally the exact moment young quarterbacks either take a genuine leap forward or get fully exposed. And it's also traditionally where a recovering veteran either looks completely restored or starts revealing the cracks that come with carrying an aging, surgically repaired body through live contact again. Both of these quarterbacks are about to be tested in ways spring practice players simply cannot replicate, and I'd argue that's exactly why Monken hasn't rushed toward naming a starter. He genuinely doesn't know who his guy is yet. Nobody outside that building does. Honestly, I'd bet nobody fully inside it does either. Not yet. But here's what I keep coming back to every single time I sit with this story. A gap that was supposed to be uncrossable between a former first overall pick with nearly a decade of NFL experience and a fifth-round rookie who barely played a full season as a college starter at his final stop is being described by the people standing closest to it as bridged. Not fully closed, not decided, but bridged. That one word alone should be completely reshaping how casual fans are framing this entire competition, because it means the ground underneath Watson's obvious frontrunner label has been quietly shifting for months now, while a massive chunk of the outside conversation was still running entirely off last December's headlines. I'm not going to sit here and guarantee you Shedeur walks out of camp holding the keys to that offense, because I genuinely don't know that, and anyone telling you they know it with certainty right now is selling you something they don't actually have. What I will tell you is this: the easiest, laziest story anyone could tell about this quarterback room was always going to be the veteran keeps his job because that's just how it usually goes. And for an entire offseason now, the people who actually have eyes on that practice field every single day have quietly, consistently been telling a completely different version of events instead. That disconnect right there is the whole story. And once the pads finally come on and the lights get brighter, we're about to find out which version was actually true all along.